Okay, this is the introduction to Maximalism. Some is never enough. So our essential questions for today is, what is Maximalism? How is it manifested in cultures? What does it look like in art? And how does it connect to current society? And on the right, you see a maximalist painting by Tiger Tashi, who was one of the Japanese founders of Maximalism. And by looking at it, you can see that the composition is very crowded. There's a whole lot going on, both in terms of art and in terms of concepts. So maximalism is the philosophy of excess. This can be the excess of material items and goods, of relationships, of behavior, excess of pattern, excess of color, excess of sounds. Maximalists value multiples and amounts of things. So on the right, there is one of the photographs from a maximalist fashion shoot. It has become a trend in fashion as well. And you can see how heavily patterned things are. The carpet, the chair, the background curtains, and her garments as well. Everything has a pattern and a color and a texture to it. So in cultures, maximalism can be displays of power and wealth. Displays of power would include things like military parades and exercises. Look how much warfare we have. We have all this equipment. It could be victory celebrations. Think about parades. Think about competitive activities where you want to have all the trophies, all the ribbons, all the money. So on the top right, you have a photograph here of a military demonstration, a military exercise and parade where you have troops lined up and then you have equipment. There's different kinds of tanks and artillery and other things. Displays of wealth include material goods of great value. So think about things like the crown jewels, designer clothing, head to toe in a designer brand, large ornate buildings. Think palaces, cathedrals, really expensive modern architecture, the Sydney Opera House, and also expensive disposable items, meaning that you have items that are not necessarily built to last a lifetime, like shoes eventually wear out, but there's a huge difference between a pair of dollar plastic flip-flops and a $7,000 pair of shoes, even though they're both meant to be worn, utilized, live their life, and be tossed. So at the bottom, we have one of the portraits of Queen Elizabeth of England demonstrating their excess of wealth. They have not only the throne and the elaborate outfit, but the crown jewels, which is the crown on the head, and the orb and the scepter, and then the ermine cloak. Ermine is the black and white spotted fur that signifies royalty. And then on the right, there is a pair of designer shoes that cost a small fortune. And they are well made and beautiful, but they are ultimately something that is disposable. So maximalism in culture, it can be the result of anxiety and the cautionary ideas that result from being anxious. So within a culture, we're talking things like stockpiling goods and resources, reducing trade with other people. We're keeping all of our stuff. We're not going to trade with you. Saving your money instead of spending it. Controlling information. So you have all the knowledge and you only give away little tiny bits of what you want people to know. And then hiding and hoarding your wealth and reducing charity. I need to take care of myself first. So in stockpiling goods culturally, this often, if you're talking about a national thing, this can include things like weapons. It can include things like health services, like vaccines. It can include oil, gas, food, any of those kind of things, because there's the anxiety that we're going to run out. We're not going to have enough. Nobody's going to give us anything if we run out. So we're saving everything for us. And on the right is an image of Scrooge McDuck, who is, most of you are probably familiar with, a Disney character, kind of an old school one. And he was known for being, like Ebenezer Scrooge in the Christmas Carol, very miserly, very not given to charity, and for hoarding his wealth. And he liked to do things like this, go swimming in it and whatnot. So in art, Maximalism was a reaction to minimalism, where they did the opposite, because instead of reducing things to just that one element or principle, the viewer is faced with multiple objects, ideas, designs, and it can cause excitement, it can cause emotion, boldness, emphasize personality, increase content, be amusing, and also make the viewer spend more time with the picture. If you think back to the images that you saw for the week of minimalism, you didn't have to spend a very long time looking at it. But when you look at this photograph of an interior, and you really start kind of breaking it down, and you start realizing, oh, well, let's see. There's a lady on the carpet with some telephones hanging around her. And the floor and the walls are canned spaghetti. And this is pool players. And this is a carpet on the wall with a lady coming out of it. There's a piano pillow. These look like they might be snakes for upholstery. This room has popcorn walls. And you can just kind of keep going, because there are so many layers to notice. And then once you notice them, you start thinking, well, how do they go together? And there's some pretty easy visual things that go together. Obviously, the spaghetti and the snakes kind of blend together, and then you have those pop colors start blending together, and your brain just kind of has to really work on it. Sometimes this is overwhelming for people, and they can't. They notice one thing, and then their brain kind of shuts down and moves on. So some characteristics of maximalism in art. The composition is dense with little negative space. Colors tend to be saturated, they're combined, they're intense. Patterns are layered on top of each other. There's a lot of clashing ideas with colors and textures and patterns. And if you have a singular subject, your background is extremely bold. So in this image of sea creatures, even though you have a dominant idea of the shrimp, there is a lot going on in the background. There is not just blank water. You have all the little hydras and other forms of sea life. So some more examples of maximalism in art. On the left, even though the colors are more neutral based, you have that repetition of faces. If you were playing the game, Where's Waldo is an example of maximalism in game design, where you have your little person hidden among all of these, other things going on, very dense activities. And on the right, you have one that is more abstract, non-objective, that is reduced to shapes and colors and an overall movement of pattern. On the left is a fashion portrait, and on the right is oil painting. Both of these include figures. The fashion is, again, it's for the maximalism fashion chic trend, where you have the model, against a heavily patterned background, and everything that she is wearing is also very heavily patterned and colorful. And then on the right, you have a more simple portrait of a person. It's very realistic, just like you did with the little candies. But the background has this really heavy pattern, and the pattern is actually breaking out and coming over and kind of starting to take him over too, down here at the bottom. So maximalism in our current COVID culture. Before COVID, minimalism was the dominant design trend. It was the whole movement towards reduce, 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 get down to the basics, leave an uncluttered, simple life, including the movement in architecture to living in smaller spaces and spending most of your time in other spaces. So things like tiny houses, capsule hotels, those were really popular. But then when everybody had to stay home, there became a resurgence of maximalism. And the reason was that there was the anxiety and the resulting security that you get when you stockpile goods and resources. And everybody knows that toilet paper was one of those that was heavily stockpiled and still is, as well as paper towels and cleaning supplies. And then creating stimulating interior environments. If you are at home all day and you are within your space and you have minimalized and you have a room we'll go with the all white trend, everything is white, decluttered, very simple. That might be calming if you had a lot of outside activity and you come home to that, but when you're in that 24/7, it becomes kind of clinical and depersonalized, and it doesn't create enough stimulus to get your brain going. And then also during this time, it gave people time to revisit heritage artifacts, photos, memorabilia. A lot of people spent time cleaning out and organizing home storage areas like garages or attics or basements and other places where basements live, and then going through these things that they hadn't encountered before: old photographs, old letters, diaries. So your assignment for your first day is a multiple scavenger hunt. So you need some sort of technology, camera. You can use your Chromebook if you don't have a cell phone, but cell phone cameras are better. Objects. Or if you don't want to do photography, you could do traditional drawing materials and draw it, though that's a little bit more work. So you're going to find something in your home that you have multiples of. It can be items that are exactly identical, like 20 ink pens. Think about class. You guys know my obsession with those dark crystal bold ink pens, and I have them hoarded away everywhere, and I probably have 100 of them at home. Or they could be a variety of the same object. Think about spoons in the kitchen. You have everything from teaspoons to tablespoons to serving spoons and cooking spoons. For me, it's kind of like in the picture, even though with the picture they've included other items as well. But scissors. Kind of lost a lot of my scissors when we moved, but at one point I had 27 pairs of scissors in the house, which is an excess, I admit. And then once you pick out your object and collect them, group them together artistically. You can have them orderly or chaotic. You can include other things with them if you like, or you could leave them just plain. Photograph them or draw them and upload them. That's it.